What if all of modern society were built on a silent secret, an invisible pact that everyone feels, yet few dare to name? You sense it in the rush of mornings, in the emptiness that stubbornly emerges even after another achievement, in the suffocating silence when the glow of your phone fades. It's a secret that disguises itself as progress, as freedom, as abundance, but at its core, it keeps us imprisoned. We live in a time when we have more than ever, yet feel less than ever. It's as if we are surrounded by feasts, but every plate is made of smoke. We touch, consume, accumulate, and still the hunger remains. This contradiction isn't just a quirk of modern life. It is the engine that drives it. But what exactly is this secret? It doesn't appear in headlines, nor is it taught in schools or shared in families. On the contrary, the more it stays hidden, the more powerful it becomes. It's a secret that shapes not only our economy and politics but also our relationships, our mental health, and even the way we see ourselves. And here's the promise. If you stay with me until the end, you won't find a magic solution, but perhaps something more dangerous and more liberating. You will glimpse the fissure, the crack in the grand stage of modernity. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because this secret doesn't belong to governments or corporations. It lives within us. It hides in our silent anxiety, in our endless comparisons with others, in our frantic pursuit of something that never seems enough. It's a secret that makes us work endless hours, even when we don't know why. That makes us scroll through social media without thinking, even knowing we won't find what we're truly seeking. That makes us believe life is always almost beginning, but never now. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." And perhaps that's it. The secret of modern society is that it gives us infinite possibilities, but no direction. An ocean of choices, yet no safe harbor. And when we face this abyss of options, what do? We flee into distractions. We cling to fragile identities. We hide behind routines we call normal, but which are really anesthetics carefully dispensed. And here lies the central question. What happens when the emptiness that drives us becomes greater than the meaning that sustains us? Think about that. If the promise of progress were true, we should already be living in an era of fulfillment. Technology would liberate us. Consumption would satisfy us. Freedom would complete us. But something failed. And this failure is not just individual, it's collective. Not just psychological, it's structural. Not just a problem, it's a paradox. And it's precisely this paradox that we are about to unfold. In the next chapter, we'll dive into the first sign of this secret. Emptiness disguised as abundance. Perhaps the greatest lie isn't in scarcity, but in the false plenitude that surrounds us. But before we move forward, let me say this. If hearing these words makes you uncomfortable, it may not be just because I'm describing society. Perhaps it's because deep down I'm describing you. And if that's the case, stay here. Because what comes next could change not only the way you see the world, but the way you see yourself within it. Imagine walking into a modern supermarket. The shelves overflow with options. Dozens of brands of water, endless kinds of bread, a cascade of colorful labels vying for your attention. The promise is clear. The more choices, the more freedom. The more abundance, the more satisfaction. But then comes the strange feeling. Amidst all this plenty, nothing ever feels enough. No matter what you choose, there's always the lingering doubt that you could have chosen better. This is the first symptom of modernity's great secret. Abundance does not free us from emptiness, it deepens it. The sociologist Zygmunt Bauman called our era a liquid society. Everything flows, everything changes, everything dissolves before we can hold on. Our objects, our relationships, even our identities, they're all disposable. We consume not to fill real needs but to patch invisible holes. We buy clothes to cover insecurities, gadgets to escape silence, trips to forget for a few days the life we can't endure. And yet, the more we try to fill the void, the more it expands. It's like drinking seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. This logic isn't limited to physical store shelves. It's on our screens in the endless scroll of social media. Hundreds of photos, thousands of videos, millions of words, a limitless buffet of stimuli that never satisfies. Every like sparks a flicker of pleasure, but it evaporates before it even reaches the heart. It's an emotional diet made of empty calories. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And perhaps that's what we're missing. It's not an abundance of means we need, but of ends. What good are 1,000 tools if we have no purpose to use them? Yet here lies the contradiction. Abundance is exactly what keeps the system running. If we were truly satisfied, we would stop consuming. If we were whole, we wouldn't need to fill our time with distractions. And that's why emptiness is never treated as a problem to be solved. It's treated as a market opportunity. Think of the industries that thrive by feeding your sense of lack. Fashion, which must convince you that you're never dressed well enough. Social media, which depends on you never feeling recognized enough. Entertainment, which relies on you never being distracted enough. Emptiness becomes the most profitable raw material of our time. It's not an accident, it's a design. And here emerges the cruelest paradox. Abundance, which should signal civilizational achievement, has become a smokescreen to hide an existential desert. We live surrounded by everything, yet deprived of ourselves. Our senses are numbed by excess, while our soul cries out for essence. Perhaps that's why the French philosopher Albert Camus said, "The fundamental philosophical problem is suicide." Not in the literal sense, but in the weight of the question, if life has lost its meaning, why go on? And it's precisely this question that modern society avoids at all costs. It doesn't want us to think about emptiness, it wants us to fill it quickly with something new, something shiny, something to keep us busy until the next distraction. But there's a silent danger in this. When emptiness is constantly denied, it grows in the shadows. It transforms into anxiety, depression, a diffuse sense that we are always falling behind in life. And deep down we know, it's not that something is missing outside of us. It's that we've forgotten to look within. And so the question remains, is modern abundance just a grand camouflage for the desert of the human soul? This is the dilemma we must face. Because as long as we keep believing that the next object, the next trip, or the next relationship will fix what we feel, we remain trapped in the cycle of emptiness. And emptiness does not dissolve through consumption, it only illuminates through awareness. But before we speak of awareness, we need to take one more step. If the first secret is that abundance hides a void, the second is even more unsettling. The freedom we so often celebrate may be just another form of prison. And this is the question we'll confront in the next chapter. Modernity made us a seductive promise. We would be free. Free to choose our careers, our identities, our partners, our dreams. Free to design the life we want, unbound by the past, unconfined by fixed borders. But what few realize is that this promise has become one of the greatest traps of our age. Because we have never been so free, and at the same time never felt so imprisoned. Søren Kierkegaard, back in the 19th century, had already diagnosed this dilemma. For him, unlimited freedom was not a blessing but a vertigo. The excess of possibilities throws us into an abyss of indecision. Every choice carries the weight of 1,000 choices we didn't make. And faced with this burden, we often choose nothing at all. We live in suspension, anesthetized, always on the verge of beginning but never truly living. It is the paralysis of the possible. It is the student afraid to commit to a profession because it could be anything. It is the adult lost among disposable relationships, unable to go deep, because there is always the promise of someone better, just a few clicks away. It is the individual who can never be satisfied with the present, because at every moment they imagine all the lives they are not living. Thus, what we call freedom transforms into anxiety. And anxiety does not arise from too many limits, but from too many horizons. Nietzsche, in his critique of the morality of his time, said that modern humans are condemned to carry the weight of a dead god. Without fixed structures, without transcendent values, we are left adrift in the void, forced to invent our own meanings. And while this may sound liberating, it is also an almost unbearable burden. Because creating meaning from nothing demands an inner strength that few can sustain without breaking. The result is that we seek crutches. We take refuge in ready-made systems. Political ideologies, cultural movements, digital tribes. It's as if we say, I can't bear the responsibility of choosing alone. Tell me what to think, what to feel, how to live. And then, ironically, total freedom pushes us back into new forms of servitude. We live, then, in a cruel paradox. We fight for autonomy, but when faced with it, we feel crushed. Perhaps this is why so many people live in constant flight from themselves. Flight through work, through endless productivity. Flight through entertainment, keeping us too busy to face the silence. Flight through social media, where there is always another window to avoid looking inward. Modernity sold us the idea that being free means being able to do anything. But is that really freedom? Or is true freedom only possible when we know how to say no, when we can commit, when we choose one path and accept losing all the others? Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the concentration camps and founder of logotherapy, said something essential: freedom is only the negative aspect of the whole phenomenon, whose positive aspect is responsibility. In other words, it is not enough to be free from restrictions. One must be free for something. Without responsibility, freedom is nothing but a mirage that haunts us. And here emerges the question each of us must face. Is our modern freedom real or just another form of prison? Because if we cannot choose, we are prisoners of indecision. If we cannot bear the weight of silence, we are prisoners of distraction. If we cannot take responsibility, we are prisoners of any voice that tells us who we should be. The promise of modernity then reveals its hidden face. We are not fully free individuals but conditioned consumers, always searching for something to fill the anxiety of our infinite possibilities. And this brings us to an even more unsettling point. If abundance has left us hungry and freedom has left us paralyzed, perhaps the very normality we live in is a disguise for a collective form of madness. And this is exactly what we will explore in the next chapter. We live in an era where mental illness has shifted from being the exception to becoming the silent rule. Anxiety, depression, insomnia, panic attacks. We've never been so normal, and yet so unwell. The physician and thinker Gabor Mate wrote, "Being well adjusted to a profoundly sick society is not a sign of health." That sentence should ring like an alarm in our ears. Because modernity has managed to create a normality so dysfunctional that if you feel no symptoms, it may be only because you're already too numb to notice them. Consider what we call everyday life. Waking up exhausted after just a few hours of sleep. Racing against the clock to meet endless deadlines. Eating in a hurry, barely tasting our food. Spending hours in front of screens, absorbing stimuli we can hardly process. Lying in bed at night, scrolling in the dark with our minds still racing. We call this routine. But shouldn't we call it a symptom? We live in a culture that has turned exhaustion into virtue. Fatigue has become a badge of honor. Being busy has become synonymous with importance. And in this logic, rest is not seen as a human necessity but as a weakness. It's no wonder then that millions live drained, blaming themselves for failing to keep up with a pace that was never human. The most insidious part, however, is that this madness is legitimized by the collective. If everyone lives this way, we conclude it must be normal. But normality here does not mean health, it only means conformity. Arthur Schopenhauer said, "Health is not everything, but without health, everything is nothing." And yet, we sacrifice our mental well-being in the name of productivity metrics, status, and digital recognition. We work not only to survive but to perform. Not merely to live but to show that we are living. Social media amplifies this madness. It creates a constant showcase where everyone must display happiness, success, and vitality. But the stage is deceptive. Behind the radiant image, millions cry in silence, feeling like failures for not living up to the collective performance. It's a madness validated by endless comparison. Nietzsche already warned against the danger of the herd instinct, the human tendency to follow the group, even if it means sacrificing one's own individuality. Today the herd is no longer just in the streets, it's in our timelines. We march together, unaware that the path leads us toward the abyss. Here lies the paradox. The more we conform to normality, the further we drift from health. The more we try to appear well-adjusted, the more we disconnect from who we truly are. This is why so many feel out of place, even when doing everything right. Because deep down they sense that it's not natural to live permanently overwhelmed, anxious, and dissatisfied. Perhaps the true madness is not in those who suffer, but in those who no longer feel anything. In those who live anesthetized, performing like machines without questioning. In those who take pride in never stopping, never allowing themselves vulnerability, never looking inward. And here emerges a disturbing question. If normality is actually a form of collective madness, what does it mean to be sane in a sick world? This question has no simple answer. But it opens a path. Because if we recognize that the social standard is dysfunctional, we can begin to seek alternatives. We can learn to say no to the imposed pace, to distrust the rush, to cultivate spaces of silence amidst the noise. But before we speak of healing, we must understand an even darker stage of this process. If normality has become collective madness, it's because we live inside a true factory of identities. And this factory does not produce individuals, it produces characters. And that is what we will explore in the next chapter. If modern normality is already a form of collective madness, an even deeper and more unsettling force is at play. Our identities are no longer built from inner experience, they are manufactured through the gaze of others. We live in an era where simply being is not enough. One must appear. It is not enough to exist, one must display. The self, once formed in solitude, silence and reflection, is now shaped by the global showcase of social media. Nietzsche, in his critique of the herd instinct, had already warned of this tendency. The more we allow ourselves to be guided by the eyes of others, the less capable we become of hearing our own voice. Today, this herd instinct has found a perfect tool. Digital platforms that turn every gesture, every thought, every emotion into a public spectacle. And so, life becomes a permanent theater. We put on digital masks and step onto the stage. With every post, we perform carefully edited fragments of who we wish to be. With every like, we receive an applause that gives us the illusion of existence. But when the screen's light fades, silence reminds us, who is behind the mask? The truth is harsh. The more we show, the less we know who we are. Performance replaces presence. The character swallows the person. And slowly, we come to believe that the fabricated version is more real than the human being who breathes behind it. This logic is not limited to social media. It permeates work, relationships, even spirituality. In a world of constant exposure, every space becomes a stage. You are no longer just a professional, you are a personal brand. No longer just someone who loves, you are someone who displays that love as a digital narrative. No longer just someone seeking meaning, you are someone who must prove that meaning to an invisible audience. Carl Jung said that every human being must, at some point, confront their shadow, that which we hide from ourselves, that which we do not want others to see. But in the modern identity factory, the shadow is not only hidden, it is denied. And the more we deny our shadow, the more we become its prisoner. The result is an epidemic of alienation. We live disconnected from ourselves while simultaneously overexposing ourselves to others. It's a cruel paradox, overexposure and inner emptiness at the same time. Consider how much this benefits the system. An individual who doesn't know themselves is easily manipulated. An unstable identity is the ideal consumer, always searching for something that confirms who they think they are. If you don't know who you are, you need to buy to feel like someone. You need to follow trends, adopt narratives, display symbols. And so, the economy of emptiness sustains itself. The psychologist Eric Fromm called this, the commodification of the self. We start to see ourselves as products to be sold, evaluated, and consumed. And in the process, we forget that we are not commodities, we are human beings with depth, contradictions, and silences that do not fit into a showcase. But who profits from this identity factory? Here we reach the heart of the modern secret. Human emptiness is not a flaw in the system, it is its fuel. The more insecure we are about who we are, the more we look outside ourselves. And the more we look outside, the more we feed the cycle of consumption, performance, and alienation. The manufactured identity is, therefore, the perfect mechanism. It keeps you dissatisfied with yourself. It makes you believe that something is always missing. And it ensures that you keep consuming in an attempt to fill the gap. Here is the central revelation. The system does not fear your emptiness, it depends on it. Nietzsche said, "Become who you are." But how can we become ourselves in a world that doesn't leave us at peace, not even in silence? This is the dilemma we must face. Perhaps we can never find our true identity while trapped in the relentless theater of display. And then comes the inevitable question. If emptiness is the invisible engine of modern society, what does it mean to awaken from it? This is what we will explore in the next chapter, the path of consciousness. Because only when we understand that emptiness is not an accident, but a design, can we begin to glimpse a different way of living. We have reached the central point. We've seen how abundance hides a void, how freedom turns into prison, how normality is a form of collective madness, and how our identities are mass-produced. But now we must confront the question that burns silently. If emptiness is the secret that sustains modern society, is there a way out? The answer is neither simple nor comforting. Because the way out is not in overthrowing the system. It is too vast and we are inevitably inside it. The way out is also not in escaping to a pure or authentic life outside the world. This purity is just another illusion, sold in a different package. The only real path is that of consciousness. Carl Jung said, "What is not made conscious returns as destiny." In other words, until we see the emptiness that drives us, it will continue to control us invisibly. But when we dare to look at it, without anesthesia, without distraction, something changes. Emptiness stops being just a hole to be filled and becomes a space to inhabit. This is perhaps modernity's greatest taboo, learning to be with one's own emptiness. Learning to sit in silence without immediately opening a screen. Learning to endure solitude without filling it with artificial noise. Learning to say no even when everything around us demands that we say yes. It is not an easy path. Consciousness does not promise immediate happiness. On the contrary, at first it hurts. It reveals the fragility of our identities, the superficiality of our distractions, the open wound beneath the makeup of normality. But, little by little, this pain transforms into freedom. Not the false freedom of I can be everything, but the concrete freedom of I can be who I truly am. Viktor Frankl, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, wrote that a human being can endure almost any suffering if they have a why. Perhaps our greatest challenge today is not to eliminate suffering, but to rediscover the why that gives it meaning. Because at its core, emptiness does not disappear, it only transforms. It can be an abyss that swallows us, or a fertile space where something new can emerge. And here lies the final paradox. The great secret of modern society is not only that it feeds on our emptiness, but that it fears, above all, that we discover the strength that can arise from it. A human being conscious of their own emptiness does not become a blind consumer. They are not so easily manipulated by false promises. They do not need to display themselves to feel they exist. They can live with less but live more fully. This does not mean abandoning the world but inhabiting it differently. It means using modern tools without being used by them. It means choosing a path among infinite options and embracing it with courage. It means, above all, reclaiming silence as a space to meet oneself. Perhaps this is the true revolution, not the fall of external structures, but the transformation of our internal relationship with them. And in that sense, consciousness is not escape, it is resistance. It is not a denial of modernity, but a silent subversion of its secret. And so we return to the initial question. What happens when the emptiness that drives us becomes greater than the meaning that sustains us? Perhaps the answer lies in accepting that emptiness does not need to be an enemy. It can be the space where meaning is born. It can be the dark soil where deep roots begin to grow. It can be the fertile silence where, for the first time, we seek nothing, simply allowing ourselves to be. Modern society will continue trying to distract us, continue trying to sell instant solutions, continue trying to turn our insecurity into profit. But within that noise, there will always be a place that no system can colonize, the inner space of awakened consciousness. And it is in this space that the true secret is revealed. It is not on the crowded shelves, nor in the endless timelines, nor in the masks we wear. It is in the moment we dare to look inward and realize that even in the emptiness, something remains. Because, in the end, perhaps the secret of modern society is not only what it hides from us, but what it tries to prevent us from discovering within ourselves. If this video made you pause, perhaps it is because a part of you was searching for it. Subscribe to the channel and continue walking with us through the contradictions that make us human. The next question may be the one you've been waiting for.